Is Islam compatible with the West? No. Compatibility is not a question about the private virtues or private vices of individual Muslims. It is a systems question. Can the institutional package of Islam, its texts, its classical jurisprudence, its identity architecture, its exit costs, its enforcement patterns, operate at meaningful density inside a classical liberal order without systematically raising the price of free inquiry, equal legal protection, exit, and sex equality? The answer is no, the structure forbids it. Islam scores 12 out of 50 on the ClearMaps. This is not a moral ranking, it is a measurement of operating cost, how expensive the lived system is to run given how human minds, incentives, status, error correction, and scale actually work. The score places it in the 10 to 19 band, systematically amplifies the failure modes the maps describe. The numbers are not adjusted for anyone's feelings. Map 1, Minds, 2 out of 10. Islam treats the mind as something that must submit, updating on the finality of the Quran, the perfected status of the Prophet, or the boundaries of the Ummah is not ordinary intellectual work. It is framed as spiritual and social self-destruction. The cost of changing your mind is kept deliberately high. The human mind was not designed for truth, it was shaped for survival in small groups where acceptance often mattered more than accuracy. Islam has no installed model of this reality, it simply overrides it. Classical jurisprudence across the major schools still carries the death penalty for adult male apostasy after a repentance window. Even where the state no longer enforces it, the social and familial rupture remains severe. Higher intelligence inside the system has historically produced more sophisticated defenses of the received model, not faster exits from it. Score 2. Map 2, Incentives and Coordination, 3 out of 10. The afterlife payoff is the dominant incentive, infinite reward for loyalty, infinite punishment for doubt or departure. Questioning the map carries not just social cost but eternal risk. Defending it, even at the cost of your life, carries eternal upside. This single feature is powerful enough that parents have publicly celebrated their children dying for the map. Earthly incentives reinforce it. Loyalty, visible piety, and defense of doctrine produce status, security, and belonging far more reliably than accuracy or correction. The community rewards those who stay inside the map and raises the price, sometimes severely, on those who step outside it. Accuracy becomes expensive. Loyalty becomes the rational choice even when the map is wrong. Score 3. Map 3, Status and Capture, 1 over 10. Once belief fuses with identity and belonging, it becomes a status marker. Challenging it no longer feels like disagreement about ideas, it feels like an attack on the group and on the self. Correct belief functions as a high-stakes purity test. Disagreement on fundamentals triggers moral condemnation, social demotion, and in many cases formal declarations of unbelief that carry real-world costs. Status and doctrine are fused so tightly that separating them is treated as betrayal. There are almost no mechanisms that treat belief as independent of status. Ambitious actors have used that fusion for power for centuries, and the pattern continues wherever the system holds strong. Score 1. Map 4, Error Correction, 2 out of 10. Error correction only works when it is relatively cheap to surface inconvenient facts. When the person who points out problems pays a higher price than the system pays for remaining wrong, correction collapses. In this system, the cost of surfacing inconvenient facts that touch fundamentals is high. Blasphemy and apostasy frameworks impose real risk on internal critics. Foundational claims show extremely limited revision. When internal correction is this expensive, competition shifts to who can be more Muslim. The purity ratchet tightens. The people willing to pay the highest personal costs rise in status. Extremism is not a random aberration. It is a predictable high-cost output of the system's own structure. Score 2. Map 5, Scale, 4 to 10s. Scale does not invent new failure modes, it amplifies the ones already present. Islam is already high cost at the community level. In Western Europe, those costs appear as parallel institutions, dual standards for women on divorce, custody, and inheritance, elevated sensitivity to blasphemy and accommodation demands that rise with density. Free inquiry becomes more expensive, equal legal standards come under pressure. A high-cost system does not merely coexist inside a host society. Once it reaches sufficient density, it begins to impose its costs on everyone, including those who never joined it. Accommodation is not kindness, it is the host society absorbing the operating costs and slowly surrendering the conditions that made the society possible. Individuals can lower their personal costs by quietly ignoring or rejecting high-cost doctrines. The system itself does not. When the system scales, the higher cost features dominate. Pointing to well-behaved individuals fails as a defense. The maps already price the exceptions. Score 4. The pattern, taken together, the 5 maps show a system that keeps the cost of updating high, rewards loyalty over accuracy, fuses belief with status, punishes internal correction, and then imposes those costs on the wider society once it reaches scale. That combination is the definition of a high-cost operating system. A reliable sign that such a system is being protected is the rapid appearance of identity shields. When the costs are pointed out, the first move is almost always Islamophobia, racism, or lumping Muslims with Islamists. The shield collapses a belief system into a racial category and raises the social price of further inquiry. It is not a rebuttal, it is data. These shields work extremely well until they are named. Once the mechanism is visible, the moral force drains out of them. The modern progressive left scores 8 out of 50 on the same maps and frequently supplies those shields. Together, they create a trap. The high-cost system grows while the tools for measuring its costs are themselves made expensive to use. For context, the same maps give Jesus a score of 34, Muhammad 17, Christianity as a whole 18, and classical liberalism around 39. The gap between Jesus and later institutional Christianity is instructive. The core teachings of Jesus carry significantly lower operating costs. Much of the West's historical trajectory and relative success can be traced to those lower-cost foundations, later reinforced by classical liberalism. Lower-cost systems produce better fruits because they do not trap people inside protected maps or punish the act of examining problems. High-cost systems do the opposite. Compatibility is structural. Higher-cost features dominate at scale. The West keeps a classical liberal operating system only by maintaining selection, enforcing one law for all, refusing parallel norms, and rejecting identity shields that raise the price of inquiry. Rejecting high-cost systems is not discrimination against persons. It is the logical defense of an operating system that keeps truth, exit, and equal protection relatively cheap. The identity shields succeed only for as long as we refuse to look at the costs they protect. Once the costs are measured, the defense collapses. The numbers do not care about anyone's identity. They only track what the system does when it runs. And when that system runs at scale inside the West, the costs are paid by everyone, whether they consented or not.